Oi, oi. So this video is one I've been very excited to push out. There is going to be a sound change as soon as I start doing the screen recording, but none of that's going to matter. You're still going to be able to understand exactly the point that I'm driving across. And within this video, you're going to find out how you can be a better without actually having to change anything you're doing. There is a calculation and there is a system put in place that will tell you what you need to do. Sounds dramatic, it's very much not. It's just an explanatory video to show how I've read into some stuff. I've been investigating some details over the last couple of years, but more so now I've done a recent trial, and I'm hoping that using that example, I can prove to you the point of what I'm trying to say. Now, there are lots of different ways that people can talk about making money, and I know a lot of people will say that the imaginary thing that's out there, value, doesn't count, but literally it's categorically that is the only way that you can make money gambling or to buy an edge, because if you're getting undervalue, then in the long term, the law of large numbers means that you will get stuffed. And if you are buying something at the right price, i.e. we'll look at a coin toss example, I'll use that again in the video, you're going to be getting yourself value if you're backing it at bigger than the actual price that it's the assumed odds. So an even money point, we all know that for a coin. But that's an easy one to use an example. I don't want to whittle too much in this early segment of it. I will just say, please do bear with me in the video. I'll try and structure it as best as I can to keep it engaging, but it is well worth a watch. You'll only need to watch this once. Obviously, you can come back to it again to jot up on your notes, but hopefully this will be eye-opening enough for you to basically explain a few things that you probably do already know about, but there might be some areas that you're not so clear in, and you can go and do your own bits, and potentially I might do some spin-off videos on the side of that. So without further ado, I'm going to get stuck into it. Like I say, screen recording is going to come up, so there will be a sound change that's in there. As always, I really do appreciate all your guys' support. To hit the 3,500 subscribers mark recently was massive for me. I just would appreciate if you could like the video, if you could comment with your feedback or any questions that are in there as well, that always helps. And please do just make sure you're subscribed if you're interested in this sort of content. Even if you're not, just subscribe. It makes it look good for me, doesn't it? So, as I say, without further ado, I'm now going to crack on to it. I'm going to do a little bit of an explainer. I'll try and do it in the right order to keep it engaging, but I guarantee you that you will learn something by watching this video. So, thanks again for your support, and I will speak to you again in a second.
As I mentioned, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey with all of this, but I'm going to try and be as concise as I can. I just want to give you enough backup within there. So there is a concept known as the wisdom of the crowd. This wisdom of the crowd is basically saying that the collective opinion of a group of diverse people is more accurate than the individual single expert. So, I mean, there's loads of examples of it, but the most obvious one for me to bring up is that there was a country fair or county fair in Plymouth in 1906 where 800 people tried to guess the weight of a dressed and slaughtered ox. Now, statistician Francis Galton was the one that did this, observed that the median guess, which was £1,207 or thereabouts, was accurate within 1% of the true weight of 1199 or 1198 pounds. So basically, this was just saying that if you have a large number of people, he could see that they actually got within 1% of the total number. Now, other examples of this have been done with jelly beans and all those sorts of things. Now, I was interested to think, how could this apply to betting? And obviously, when you're just guessing a number or a weight when no one really knows about it, there is a number to find, there is an answer. When it comes to betting, it is very much opinion-based. And then when we're talking about betting and then like picking a winner and then actually having money on it, then there's another model that comes into it because bookies bet over rounds. So how do you really apply this in? Well, I did think there was a chance that we could do this. So there's a guy on Twitter that I've shared a few times, a guy called Davey B, who is massive within his dogs, and he's such a supportive person, full stop. So every year he runs a tipping competition for the British Greyhound Derby. He does one for the Irish Derby as well. But this year there was 100 entrants that are in there. Now, they've been using Google Sheets and some forms to basically fill in the results. And I asked Davey, could I have a look at those after? I'll keep the names anonymous, but just so I can have a look and see if using this data, if the wisdom of the crowd could prove a point for us. So that's the starting point for this. I'm going to talk about value in a moment. And I think the best way to do it is I'm going to come back to looking at the value point after, and then I'll be talking a little bit about arbitrage betting. Maybe there's even a mention of cash outs and things in there, but let's just get stuck into the Greyhound data so you can see what my finds in were. So I pasted the data from the individual result sheets that we'd had, and then I put some formulas within here, and then ta-da, it produced me a result page. So within this results page, I have put the SP, and then I've also done it for Betfair SP. And basically, we're looking at 100 selections in each race in each round. Some of those were slightly under, but that's just because people didn't fill in the form. We did actually miss round 2 for Saturday. The information didn't come across correctly, but we're still fine. We've got 82 instead of 90 races, I think it was. But basically, in a race, we've got 100 people's opinions. If 80 people said that they were going to back trap one, then £80 hypothetically was placed on trap one, and then the money's distributed across. So there's £100 for each, well, there's £1 for each person selection. And then from a weighting perspective, trying to apply this in the form of the wisdom of the crowd, I wanted to see how close we could get to £0. Now, I'm talking about this in betting and trying to make money. You need to bear with me on the fact of how I can prove that this will make us cash. But as I said, the wisdom of the crowd thing gets in within a 1% accuracy. That was my main aim on this. The first and foremost, I didn't care about making profit. I wouldn't have expected that, because if we did, we are away from what that median number is. And the median number within this for betting perspective is we started on 0. How can we go through a whole competition to stay at 0? That's where I'm putting the marker at. Well, I did it first with SP, and that's in this red table here. And you can see that there's losses in most rounds, apart from round 3. There's an overall loss that looks like a significant amount of money, but it is staked across 7,328 bets, so £7,328. That means there's a return on investment here of 11.67%. Now, I did briefly touch on the fact that there is overround when it comes to betting. So a bookmaker's book, you can look at it yourself. If you go on check and see what the markets are, typically for a greyhound race, it would be somewhere around 110 to 115%. So 11.67 return on investment off those overround markets, it would mean you'd have to bet £110 or 115 at those percentages to get your £100 back. This is probably not too far off. But again, from a visual perspective, it's not going to look good if I'm showing you a number that goes down. Anyway, we've got to look at this conversely to see how we could make money. But if I move this into Betfair SP, which I do stand by is much better than industry SP, I've applied the 2% commission that would be taken off. But you can see that the return on investment in this green table is now 0.52% as a loss. So it is a loss, but it's within that 1% threshold that I was mentioning about the wisdom of the crowd theory. And again, off the £7,328 that was staked, 37 quid's gone. So again, it's almost negligible, pretty much pointless, we'd say, from a betting perspective. But obviously there would have been people that probably performed better than 0, so there might have been some tipsters or people you could follow in there. But then there's obviously people in there as well that would have lost money. I just mean that the average across everybody that gets involved is within that percent of £0. If you're still with me, then very well done. And again, I do appreciate the support. We'll move on now to me looking at a value expectation for it, but I'm just going to quickly roll over to some numbers for the side. So of the people that perform, because I did do individual selections that are in there as well, 33% of the sample, so 33 people out of the 100, actually performed better than this loss of 37 quid. So a return of investment of minus 0.5%. It wasn't massive, though, for any one individual person. The return on investment was 75%. So again, it is pretty big, but if only a third of the people were able to do that. If you tried to singly pick out an expert, you had a 1 in 3 chance of finding someone that's profitable. And as I say, they've only beaten minus 0.5%. The top money was a 75% return on investment. So it would have been punty. When we actually look at the return on investment for naps in terms of what would have done well compared to what the total number was, well, 50% of naps came in and 42% of next best were performing better than average. Again, if the better bets are genuinely better bets, then you'd expect that to be higher than the next best, so those numbers fall in. So when it comes to the really strong fancy bets, because this is not a group of people that have no knowledge, this is a group of people that like greyhound racing, the fact that it's 50-50, whether you could have followed people individually or you could have just followed someone at random, sort of backs up and it stacks up. So I'm going to talk about value now, because this is the crucial point of where we're looking at this. I said that I did £1 for every single person's selections. So if we had 80% of people fancying a dog, £80 hypothetically would have been struck on them. When it comes to a value perspective, was the odds of that dog worth actually betting? So I go back to the coin flip example again. A 50-50 chance is an even money poke. So if you're betting it at under even money, i.e. a coin toss, if it's 10 to 11 the pair with a football match, you're going to lose money in the long run. That's just the fact of it. It needs to be a bigger price, but there needs to be enough of an edge for it to be worthwhile, because I'm going to talk about value a bit now and talk to you about a few examples. But as much as it is 50-50 and we look at the large numbers, I'm going to appeal to you now to just show you how we can use an example. Again, it's back to the coin toss, but we're going to stick back to Google. If we look at the law of large numbers, it basically just says the theorem describes the result of performing the same experiment of a large number of times. So the law of large numbers means that the longer you do it, variance basically stips away and bad luck and all those sort of things are gone. So the bigger examples you do it for, the more you're in for it. So we're going to look at a binomial distribution for a coin toss calculator. I said I was going to use this example till the kills come home, but basically we know we're saying it's 50-50, and over a large long period we're going to say that you know, it would be 500 out of 1,000 examples would be one way or the other. Now, we can say that, and we know that there could be some variance that's within there. But if we use this calculation, we're saying the probability of success, so 50-50 because it's a coin flip, we say 1,000 for the number of trials. If we were to put 500 in there, this is going to confuse you a little bit, but just ignore it slightly for the beginning. The probability of getting more than or equal to that 500 is a 50% chance. Then the probability of getting less than is a 48% chance. That's moving ourselves up there. What we're going to do is we're going to squeeze this down to say, look, let's just look worst case scenario off of 1,000 examples. How can we get this all the way up? And here at 450, the probability of getting at least 450 or greater than 450 is 99.9% accurate. It's 100% accurate for the purpose of this example. So we know out of 1,000, 450 will come back. Now, to talk about arbitrage betting and how people are throwing away value within there, let's use an example of the coin toss, and we'll use the example that there's an even money poke for heads or tails, and there's a 3-to-1 poke for the other outcome. Now, an arbitrary bettor would know that they can bet on both outcomes to make money. We're going to use £3 as a stake, so they would put £1 on the 3-to-1 shot because that would then return £4, and they would put £2 on the even money shot just to make sure that there is no risk of losing because there's only two outcomes and they've covered them both, and they would guarantee they would win £1 on every single result, regardless of whether it was positive or it was negative. So across 1,000 trials, they would make £1,000, absolutely risk-free. So the number of successes is essentially irrelevant when it comes to those arbitrary bettors. So yes, they've made money, and yes, it was risk-free. Now, I'm a big advocate of value, and this is why I think that cashing out an arbitrary betting, obviously it can be done for people. There is less risk that's involved because there's no risk. But if we're talking about doing this for a long period of time and punting as not potentially like a living or anything like that, but as a long-term game, then we can ride this variance out. So the same example where there's 3-to-1 available and even money, but you've got £3 to bet. Knowing about value, you wouldn't bet the even money shot because it is a punt, and you know over the long period, it's 100% guaranteed that you're going to get at least 450. So you could lose a couple of quid. You would use the value at 3-to-1, knowing that that's good value. You would have the whole £3 on that. So in the 550 losses, you're losing £3 a time. So that's 1650 that's going. But for the 450 wins, you would be getting £9 profit in there. So it totals out that you would get £2,400 starting from the same stake. And I know obviously the back bank that would need to be in there, maybe there's more risk because you could be risking at the beginning, but we know on this law of averages it's going to pay out. So you would make 2,400 from the same opportunity as you would make 1,000 from arbitrary betting. That's a significant difference if you're talking about trying to make it pay in the long run and having that edge. It means the edge could drop down closer to be able to make money. So I've explained that as best as I can. How do we then use this for betting? We know about value. How do we work out staking? This example is very easy because everyone's exactly the same. Well, the Kelly Criterion is something that Patrick Veach talked about in a Star Sports a betting people interview. It's something that I'm sure a lot of people will know about, but I also think there's quite a few people that don't know about it or don't really understand it. So what happens within this instance is you would suggest what your bankroll is, you would say what the odds are being available, and you would look at your estimated probability of winning, and then you'd work out the value on that would be how much you would stake. Now, the bankroll, because this is maximally aggressive, the bankroll needs to be tweaked slightly, but you don't even need loads of money in there. So some people would say bet half the amount of the Kelly criteria. I would argue halve your bankroll. So if you said you have £200 as a betting bank, and I know potentially people will say that's not a lot of money. I promise you, I'm going to show you an example where it's more than enough cash. You don't need to have shed loads to be starting off. If you said £200 was actually your bankroll, just start your bankroll in here as 100 quid for the purpose of using the calculator. If we talk about the coin flip example, just so we can put these chances in there, we know it's a 50% chance, but you're getting odds offered at 3-to-1. According to this Kelly Criterion, it would suggest that you would stake £33, which is a third of your capital. They're saying it's an opportunity that you need to take advantage of. Now, when it comes to points betting, some people might bet £10 a point and all those different things, but depending on how much value really does depend on what you should be staking. So if the odds available on this, again, it's still good value because it's 2-to-1, the reduction would go down, but it's not moving it from a whole point to a 2-point bet or a 2-point bet to a 1-point bet. It's just dropped it down to 25. There's still a massive amount of value that's in there. Obviously, we draw a line at some point where there is some value in there, but we don't want to be risking too much. So the closer we get to the probability of it, you'll see the number just keeps going down. So we've had to go from 3-to-1 would have been betting £33, and then now we've gone all the way down to 6-4 would mean that it's halved. So it's basically maybe gone from 1 point to 2 point. All I'm saying with these things are, lots of us will be very easy to just say, I think this horse should be a price, and then basically say, I think this is how much I should put on it in terms of point staking. But if you were following people's tips, for example, and they're advising a point backing method, they need to tell you what their entry point is, or what their price they're basing it on is, what their estimated probability of winning is, because that affects what price you're backing at and what you can do. And I've seen so many people that maybe a horse gets gambled overnight, say it's a 2-point bet for someone, it's now halved in price. That may now actually technically be a 1-point bet, because it's still a bet, but you've lost a lot of the value, so you don't want to be getting stuck in. But a lot of people might have twice as much on there. Now, I've been looking at these examples to try and make me a better better. I'm trying to find the best way to bet. I talked in a video last year that I'm looking at having a few more bigger bets on things, but I need to get some guidance. There's so many bets where I don't have enough on. There are some bets where I have too much on, and simply using this Kelly criteria, we can work out what we should be staking, and it does work over a long period. So let's go back to this spreadsheet, and I'm going to prove to you how it does work over a long period. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we really need to add a little bit of slush in there and a bit of safeness, because there is a big marker that says in here about using a conservatively low estimate. And this is basically when we're doing our odds chances, sometimes we can get a bit carried away with what we think the chance is of a horse. Now, in this results 2 section, I have applied some extra logic in here to basically look at value bets. So we're looking at, if a example at the top here we can look at quite easy, it was selected by 55% of the people, Betfair was given 6-4, so that implied chance is 40%. That would be value, because we're getting 6-4 on a horse that we're saying has got more than an even money chance of doing it. So that would be classed as a value bet. In this instance here, you can see the values move to false, and that's because I've added some slush to the side. But we'll come back to that. Forget about that. That's what we talk about value, isn't it? When you think there's got more chance than the bookies are saying, which means you're getting a better edge with it. I've also looked at doing this simply for just staking a £10 point across every single value bet. So it's not every bet again, it's just the ones that I think are overpriced according to Betfair SP. Then I've used Kelly Criterion with a £100 bankroll. So it's key to mention that it's not a lot of money that's in there. And then I've shown us what the return on investment is. And then I did a rolling bankroll, because a lot of people will do this. They might start with 100 quid in their betting account. They might get themselves up to 200 quid, and they start increasing their stakes. It's potentially fine to do that at a significant point. But if you roll your bankroll and you start doing it all the time, there will be some massive, and I mean it, there will be some massive variance in there, and you've got really no chance of making a profit despite how much value you can get. So off of this slush with one, we're using the value on the votes, and these are the votes from the wisdom of the crowd. This isn't an individual expert saying, I think this has got a chance. We're just using the wisdom of the crowd again that we saw got a fair accuracy in there. Basically, if you did a £10 stake on all of those, you would get 3% return on investment, but you've made 40 quid. So it's a profit, isn't it? If we look at the Kelly Criterion betting, you'd make 37 quid, 1.58 return on investment. Maybe doesn't sound so good, but remember, it was a £100 bankroll. And I said that you might need to reload it, but you've still made 40 quid, and you only had £100 in your betting account to begin with, hypothetically, of course. So I don't think that's a bad return. And then we're looking at the Kelly roll-in. Well, it's a massive loss, and that shows the difference that you've got two more straightforward staking plans, but rolling your bankroll does not pay. And that's the reason why I've included that in this example. Now, I want to show you some numbers that are in here as well. So the Kelly roll-in 2 example, this is how bad the balance would have fluctuated. So the lowest it would have been 600 quid, basically, 591 negative. So where we've marked this bankroll as 100, by rolling it up and down, you're putting yourself in jeopardy of actually you need a lot more money than you think in terms of your actual bankroll. If we use the Kelly criterion and we look at what the rolling returns are back on there, look, we dipped over the 100, we dipped down to 150, and this is why I touched on people saying that you might want to bet half the amount that Kelly criterion suggests. You've got a 1 in 3 chance of like blowing your bankroll or halving your bankroll before you double it. If you do halve your stakes, it's a 1 in 9 chance. So as I said, I would halve your bankroll just for simplicity. There's more detail I can explain there, but just halve it and then you will keep your 7 risks. So at any point there, 150 was the most you would have been down, basically how much you had to tie up. And then if we look at the value, just having £10 on each and every single one, I don't know what your expectations would be for this, but have a think before I click anyway. It shows there that it's £64 would have been the most you would have been behind. So again, a hypothetical £100 bank, and like I say, you could potentially double it, means that using value or the Kelly criteria, we can apply it to both. We can make some money. Yes, it's a small amount of money, and yes, again, I've put the 2% Betfair commission in there, but I wanted to look at this extra slush. I talked about the conservative estimate it says in the calculator. Well, I want to know how we could apply that to this, because no one's done that. No one knows the influence or how I'm using these bets. But I'm going to go back to the coin toss example again. I like to be greedy with my value, and people sometimes mock me for it a little bit, and I don't mind, because I'm asking for prices that are absurdly big in some occasions, but I want value. So in a coin toss example, I don't want even money because that's what the actual price is. I would say it's a 6-4 poke, and 6-4 wouldn't even necessarily be a price I'm going to bet at, but I would say that's where my line is drawn. I might even want bigger than that. So I know for a fact I am being conservative, and I know for a fact that I am adding a little bit of extra slush to those prices. So when it comes to me writing out a tissue on a bookies, like a horse race or anything, I will do it to 100%. I know I've added a little bit in there, and sometimes I might even just give myself a cushion. If I think something should be a 3-1 poke, I might say, do you know what, I'm going to say I want 7-2 is my line. I want it bigger than that, and then I'll work up my margins after that. So if you're not capable of doing that, and it's obviously difficult sometimes to work this stuff out, I will do another video in how to price up a race and how to potentially work out what the price should be of something. Again, it's on your own opinion, but I'll show you some methods. For this instance, I thought, no one's doing this. I've just taken all their bets, and I've used that wisdom of the crowd example, and I'm using just people just putting their selection in. No one's looking for value, no one's looking for prices. Thought, let's add a little bit of slush to this, and by slush I mean I want to drop the percentages down to say that as much as value's value, I want to be really greedy with the value. So let's just say in an example where I think it's got, well, 80 people think it's got a chance. I used that before, an 80% chance. That means it's a 1-5 poke. If we're getting bigger than 1-5, we would bet it. So if we're getting 1-4, we'd back it. If it's 2-9, we'd back it. I think if we added 10% slush to say, look, we're being a bit exaggerative here, then that puts it at 72% chance. Then all of a sudden we're talking about backing it at 1-3-ish, and then obviously that's a difference to being backing it at 2-9. Then if we put 20% slush in there, it's going to drop down to 64-ish%, isn't it? And then obviously we're looking at backing it at maybe 4-6 or something like that. So you can see how quickly the difference comes in there. And basically we want to make sure we're getting some value, but you can't be too drastic because otherwise you'd never get a bet on. So I'm going to drop it down. And remember that round 4 was a round that was causing us issues here. The reason why that did happen, and I can explain it before I even show you what happens, is it was a very close and competitive night. There were some hard luck stories, but there always are in racing. But there was just lots of bets that were put in here where they were very close. And we're going to find that out when I show you this table below. The point of this with me adding in the slush now, you know I said about the rolling Kelly bankroll. Look how drastic it is in terms of money going down the pan when we had it, in terms of what the final outcome is, marked at all these different percentages. So this is 100% slush. This is doing everything as it is. And there's 90%, 80%, 70%, 60%, 50%. So we're getting to a point where I wanted to say, where is the pinch point that works? So as you can see, there's a baseline dotted across here. You can see that the rolling percentages does get into a profit at a point, but not until a while in. You can see the value one, where I'm just saying we're backing £10 if it's a value bet. That starts to dip, and it seems to stay in and around there, but there's not a massive amount of profit. If anything, it performs best just leaving it completely and utterly alone. But it's interesting when we look at the Kelly criteria that it never dips into a negative figure. And especially so when we get ourselves to these pinch points, we see it peak, and it peaks in line with all the different methods as well that are in there. So at this point, when we're talking about 70%, it means that you would have made £256 profit. And again, let me reiterate that there was a £100 bank. Forget turnover. If we do return on capital, that is a significant amount of money that will have been returned back. And this is not someone's advice. This is just doing the wisdom of the crowd and a pool of people picking a selection towards something. I'm just saying that if you do add yourself a bit of slush into your price, and you are going a little bit greedy, but not too greedy, because if we go to 50%, they underperformed value and Kelly Criterion. We just didn't have as many bets. We need to get to a pinch point where we are a bit more selective, but it's going to make us some money. So if it's in and around 70% or 75%, I feel like we can clearly see here that it makes that bit more money, and that's what people need to be doing. So if I drop this percentage back down to 0.7, again, like I say, look, it's a 21% return on investment, but actually a return on capital is a lot more, because it was only £100 technically at risk with the bankroll. I'm going to pull it back quickly now just to show you those rolling totals. So on the rolling bank, it was £590 at risk, I think, something like that. 191, so we've brought it back to a safer balance here. If we look at the Kelly roll-in, well, it was a lot more than this before, but it's still 137. We were down when it's on the 0.7 example. So again, like I say, maybe halve your bankroll that you're putting in there, or halve the Kelly stake that's going in there. And if we look at the value one, well, it was about £60 something, but it was only £35 you were down if we add the extra bit of slush and just make sure we are really sucking good value out of something. As I say, if you drop it all the way down to 50% or a numbers that low, you're going to put yourself in a bad position. If, like me, you already add a bit of slush, you don't need to drop it to 70%. But this is where you need to just find where your line is and start recording results. So like I say, I think this will make people better betters. I'm going to just come off of the recording of this and do another little video thing face to face so I can just look you in the eyes as I'm telling you how you can apply this and what you should be thinking about with this. I'll share links in the description to all the things that I've talked about in there. But genuinely, we all know in theory what we're doing, or we think we do. If you apply this method to your betting, then I'll categorically tell you that if you do not make money, you've either got your value prices wrong, which again, that's going to be a big problem, because if you can't work that out correctly, then you're going to struggle to make money, or you're just not good enough at picking winners. And it boils down to one of those two things. So this is a very harsh way of looking at something, but rather than just saying, oh, I think I fancy this loads, but there's not as much value in there, don't start sticking 3 or 4 times your bet on there. Work out how much you should be betting to make the most and maximize that value. And obviously, if you're following other people or prices do change, you need to put what the odds available are at the time of striking your bet. But again, if you're following someone else's advice, you need to know what they think the entry point is. So you could use the price that they've advised, or you could try and ask them. But nobody's going to be publishing that information. They don't, especially the affiliate stuff where it's a link to a bookmaker. They just want you to put a bet on, which is fine. That's the business. That's part of the game. But you need to be mindful of that if they're putting a 5-point bet down and it's halved in price, that doesn't mean put half the stake on, but it could mean that. It could mean you've only got to put 1 point on instead of their 5 points. It doesn't mean start wading in. Sometimes as well, their 5-point bets should probably be 15 and 20-point bets because there's so much value to be had. Anyway, I'm going to come off of this, go back to the video, and then we'll just wrap it up on there.
So I appreciate there's a lot of information that's gone in within here, but I've shown you an example there of 100 people betting across a 90 different races. There was a lot of outcomes. You saw there was 7,328 bets that were put in there. And I feel like I proved the point to an extent that wisdom of the crowd, i.e. having lots of people doing it, they will get themselves in and around that 0 point. And as I say, using that fact that I think it gets us in and around 0, you saw how just by betting on value, it put it into a profit on all different methods of doing it. Now, I use the different methods, the Kelly Criterion and just betting value for a level stake as the most obvious examples that people may do. What I didn't put in there before, or what I did put in but people wouldn't do, is that rolling bankroll. And the reason I say people wouldn't do it is they wouldn't admit they do it, but people will. The more money people are winning, the more they change their stakes, which is okay when you're winning, but you have to be able to back it up. You need to be able to say, if my, whatever it is, if the Kelly Criterion, if I say my bankroll is this, if my 5-point bet's £100, I need to be able to afford to do that over and over and over and over and over again until it comes in. And I don't say until it comes in. You need to be able to risk the right amount of your bankroll because the value's there. Don't be to a point where the value's not there and then you can't afford to do it. And this is why you don't need a lot of money to do it from. As I said in those examples, the Kelly Criterion in the middle made profit. It was £100 was at risk. We saw it went up a bit further, so we could say, like I say, you put your bankroll as half, you double it up. So let's just pretend £200 was the maximum that was at risk. You made 40 quid off of that, just following people's selections. And that's, like I say, it was just a wisdom of the crowd example. So nothing fancy in there, but it still made some money. If we tweaked some slush using that value to say, let's be a bit more cautious with this, we're going to say we know that there's no logic and people aren't looking for value in here, but we want to just make sure the ones that the majority of people think are going to win, we're getting a good edge on that. We actually brought ourselves to a point we made £256. So even off of a £200 bank, it's a decent return on investment or return on capital. And I'm saying this because the example of the wisdom of the crowd is just to show you that when you are basically breaking level, which is what that's doing, we're getting ourselves within that 1%, you can do all right out of betting. What you need to then do is really concentrate on the value aspect of it. I know people will say value, inverted commas, it doesn't exist. It does. It's a tangible thing that everything has a price. And if you can buy something at a cheaper price and then you're basically investing, then in the long term, you're going to make money. I showed you those law of large numbers where the coin toss example, 450 is 100% going to happen. It's a 99.9% chance of happening. It's the minimum you're going to get back. So that's why you have to add that bit of slush that's in there. And by doing so, you're going to make money. And I guarantee you'll do it. So I was talking last season about changing my betting strategy. This year, I will be following this method. I will be betting all my stakes on there. My tip videos will be coming out the weekends, and I will be applying it based on my bank and my stake that's in here. I can share that with you. I will be telling you the price chance that I think everything's got. So if you do want to follow me in, then you can, again, type in your bankroll and type in the price that you can get at that time. And that will tell you how much you need to stake. Now, at the end of the season, I will show you my profit and loss because I'd love to be able to sit here now and say, look, this is how much money I make by doing my bets. But as I said in the last part of the recording, that ultimately, if you're getting the value price wrong, i.e. the coin flip's easy, we know it's even money, and I know adding the 6-4 price to it is adding a bit of slush. I know that's a fact. We all know that's a fact. When it comes to betting, it is opinions, and there are areas outside of our control that we can't control. So you need to make sure you add in that slush. But if it gets to the end and you're not making money, there's two issues. You're not picking the right horses, so you're just basically not good enough a judge in that respect, or you're picking the right horses, but you're not pricing them correctly. Your value line of it is wrong. And that's where you need to address what those things are. So if you record results, you put in your entry price that's in there, and let's just say you've got 50 even money shots across there. Have a look and see if you do get 45% of those coming in by that, again, law of averages using that binom distribution. You 99.9%, that's how the ratio is going to split. It'll be 45% of those even money shots should come in. And then if you're not doing that, maybe think to yourself, right, I can still fancy these horses. I just need to ask for a bit more value. And I know it's hard because it will limit the amount of bets we're having, and we all fancy a flutter. We're all punters at the end of the day. But I'm going to be doing this for the season. I wanted to give you a heads up on it so that you guys can apply it to yourself in advance. Anyway, I may do an update in the middle of the season to tell you where I'm at with it. And then at the end of the season, I'll be able to publish what my results are. And as I say, if it gets to the end and I've not made money, then it's because I'm not a good enough judge, or I'm not as good as I think I am at pricing stuff. But I back myself. I know I'm good enough. It's why I like to talk to so many other people, get other people's opinions, just in case I've missed something, or to get a feel for what a lot of other people think as well, because that can build into the picture of what prices I think could be available, which horses might get backed, where my entry point might sit at. But ultimately, I do it myself. I'm a victim of it. I might have too much on the wrong horses when I just fancy a bet, and I may not have enough on the ones that I really should. And it's fine. It's fine that we all make these mistakes, but I have done this study and I've been looking at this for quite a while. I've put something together here that I think clearly shows that we can do something with it. And yes, it is a single example. I could run these examples hundreds of times, but I've got enough information here to back myself to know that this is the way that I need to bet and the way that I need to not prove a point, but to prove to myself that this is how I can make money. And again, you don't need to have that massive bankroll that everyone assumes that you might need to do. So I know I've waffled quite a lot. I appreciate if you sat all the way through with this. Again, liking the videos, any comments with your feedback, I really appreciate. Please do subscribe to the channel. I'll be getting back with just the anti-post stuff where I'll be either ripping people to shreds or complimenting their selections and putting a few of my own thoughts out there too. And any bets I'm having for the season, they are categorically going to be published. If I fancy something on a Tuesday, I'll put a quick video up on a Tuesday. And again, with all of this, I'll show you what my percentage chance is. So if you did want to follow this system for a while, you can do so. I wish you all the best of luck in your endeavours. I hope some of you did find this useful, and I thank you once again for your support. I will see you again soon.